We're going to be recording these talks, so if there's anyone who's giving a talk who doesn't want it recorded or doesn't want it put on YouTube for others to enjoy, just let us know. We won't put it up, but we wanted to record each of these talks individually and then put them up on YouTube so that people can, people who weren't able to come today are able to look and watch them. So just let me know if you don't want to do that. But we're going to be passing this off to each speaker as we go so that we can do that. And I thank my son for being here to record for us. So I'm talking about the history of SIU plastic surgery. This is something I wish I had done 10 years ago with my dad. Sorry. You know, 10 years ago, I was busy building a practice and had young kids, so I didn't get around to it, and I really regret that. But I'm hoping that with this, I can restore some of that history, that you'll help me do that. So I gave everybody this little booklet, and I thought this was incredibly appropriate because I found this I was looking for a pad, and I had kept some stuff of my parents and when they moved out, and I found this, and I thought this was incredibly appropriate because there's nobody this came from except my dad, which it says, if you don't smoke, I won't fart. So I handed that out to everybody, especially some of the more senior individuals in the room, because you're going to be able to correct me if I'm wrong about some things about the history, so I would hope you would write that down if I am, or if I've left something out, because there is a lot that I did not know or I could not find out. So I'm hoping that you'll help me so that instead of this just being a talk, this will become a written history of SIU plastic surgery. So why did the medical school start? So in 1968, the Illinois Board of Higher Education recommended that SIU establish a medical school. So there was a legislative mandate to create a community medical school. You know, the mission of that community medical school was to meet the primary care needs of the community. Richard Moy was appointed the dean, and then Roland Foltz was appointed the department chair of surgery. So in 1971, he went looking for a chairman for plastic surgery. He reached out to, this is Dr. Foltz, he reached out to Don Laub, Maurice Yakowitz, Jack Hoops, and Ken Pickerel were four of the well-known names that he reached out to. Oh, did it just turn on? Maybe I need to adjust that. He was given 49 candidate names. Now, I'm not sure if all 49 of these people came to interview. I just know these were names that were given to Dr. Foltz to potentially interview. In November of '72, Frank Masters in Kansas City suggested reaching out to Jim Bennett at Indiana University. So Jim Bennett suggested Elvin Zook to come interview for the position. He was board certified in general surgery, plastic surgery, and thoracic. He was, at that point, an assistant professor at Indiana University, and he was chief plastic surgeon at Marion County General Hospital. And this is a picture of him with Dr. Bennett. They're both sitting. And then I don't know if some of you recognize some of the other plastic surgeons that I'm well aware of, David Smith and David Larson, both who went on to become chairs as well at other institutions. And the other three you may also know. I'm not sure who those other three are. So January 1973, Dr. Zook interviewed, and when Dr. Foltz made comments about him after the interview, he said that he was extremely impressive, enthusiastic young surgeon with a positive, zealous personality who would be a strong colleague in the surgical education arena, which I think sums up my dad pretty well. I think it's pretty funny that Robert Patton, the chief of surgery at Memorial at that time, said, "I hope he's as good as he thinks he is." Which also sounds like my dad. So he was offered and accepted the position as associate professor and chair of plastic surgery in 1973. When he went back to Indiana and said, I'm going to take it, I'm going to take the job, Jim Bennett said, "Why would you go? There is nothing there." And he said, "That is why I'm going. If there's anything there in 40 years, I will have contributed." So this is pretty interesting. I don't know if this is his full contract. If it is his full contract, it's very different than our contracts now because it's 5 things, but this is what I could find. So those were what he was going to do as far as developing a program. That was the plan. So SIU plastic surgery. 1973, he arrives in Springfield. He is the first plastic surgeon in the community. He takes call every night and accepts everything. So whenever the residents are talking about, well, why do we as plastic surgeons do this? And I'm like, well, it started 50 years ago when Dr. Zook came to town and said, I'm taking everything. So that's why we have the reputation we have.
So I remember one time Dr. Ramsey telling me that when he was on call with Dr. Zook early on, that they were in the OR every night for 2 weeks straight, seeing patients. So, I mean, he worked hard, obviously, to build the program as well as and as strong as he could. So in 1974, he started gathering data to justify a residency program in plastic surgery. In 75, he had the formal application. He was promoted also in 75, in July of 75, and he hired a second faculty member, Dr. Wavack, at that time. Dr. Wavack ended up eventually going out into private practice 3 years later and was in the community for quite a long time before he retired. And then the first resident was in 1976 in July, and that was Ralph Lassa, who came from California and ended up going back to California to practice. So the second resident was Alan Van Beek. He did 5 years of general surgery at Indiana and 1 year hand at Kleinert. And I'm not going through everybody. Obviously, I can't in a talk like this, but I think some of the early residents were very interesting because I don't know if you noticed with Ralph Lassa, he came and did 1 year here in plastic surgery. And then Van Beek did 18 months in plastic surgery. And some of it's because it's very different back then where you could, if you've done a few months here, you could finish up somewhere else and you could still get your plastic surgery diploma, where obviously that's not the case now. It's much, much more stringent. Dr. Russell had done general surgery at Indiana, started plastics at Indiana, and then finished up at SIU, and then did a micro-fellowship in Melbourne. And then Michael Beatty would have been the fourth resident, and he is the one who, I have a letter here, who he wanted to start a Zook Society. And I don't know, and he proposed this in 1980, and I don't know if there was actually ever a Zook Society started, or if that's just what Zookies became, which is something we just meet every year at our annual meeting and have dinner. And so I don't know if that's the same thing and it had just morphed, but I thought that was really interesting. I'd never heard about that before until I started to look into my dad's information. So I think one thing that has always been notable about what he did here was he was always, Dr. Zook was always wanting to have the support services, and he did a very good job of that from the very beginning. He started a prosthetic lab with Don Biggerstaff. He had a medical illustrator on staff for a while. And then obviously photography was always very important to him, and I think that's why we've always had such good pictures throughout all the years in history and had such good presentations because of the importance and the emphasis on photography. So we've actually had 4 photographers throughout the years, but the first was Kurt Guy, 1977 to 1984. And then I think there must have been a little bit of an overlap between Kurt and Hicks and John Hicks. I think there's a little bit of an overlap there. And then there was a photographer named Kevin, who was a few years in the middle there. And then Maria, who's our current photographer. And I think that is something that stands out for SIU, is that we do have always had such a strong photography. Let me see if I can get this to work here. Oh, no, sorry. Oh, I had a picture there, and I don't know how I'm going to make it come up. Let's see. I want to click on it. I don't know if I can do that from the back. Can you click on the first picture for me? No, it's not working. Okay. Well, nope, we won't worry about that. I had a picture of Kurt and Roxy to show that the first photographer ended up being with the first plastic surgery resident, and now they're a couple, but it's not showing up. So. But one thing that I wanted to point out, besides the importance of photography at SIU and in plastics, is that it's morphed into, it's not just taking pictures, it's not just helping us create talks, not just recording patients, but it's morphed into, Maria at this point does a ton of social media for us. She really is our biggest champion. And she's always trying to be super creative in ways for us to get our messages out. She's been incredibly active in our involvement in Bra Day. We've done it now for probably, I think it's about 10 years, has it been? Maybe even more than that now? Like maybe 12 years. We're active almost every year in some Bra Day event. We've gone to New York with a couple of our patients. We've had runs. We've had events with Kelly Pickler. And we've done multiple things and done the Chicago Marathon. And all of these things have been because of Maria. So I wanted to thank her for everything she's done. And then also today, and doing all of this has been because of Maria. All right, so then what else was created? The SIU microsurgery lab was started by Dr. Van Beek in 1976, and Hans Suki, I think, was the one who started that process and started the lab, and then they brought Alan Roth in I have the date 1985, I'm not sure if that's correct, as the PhD to help work in the lab. Congenital head and neck clinic, I don't know exactly when this was started. You know, this picture is probably from, well, it's Craig Merrill, so I think it's maybe later 70s? 82, okay. So, yeah, so obviously, and that was something that was started, I mean, there's Colantino, who was the oral surgeon in town back then, and so he started this, congenital head and neck clinic with the dentists, with ENT, with Colantino, the oral surgeon, so that has a long, strong history here at SIU Plastics. And then Russell has been incredibly active in the international scene, influencing, with microsurgical cases and congenital care, getting SIU's name out there. I believe that, Craig, I'd heard that Craig Merrill was a part of getting you into that, and then obviously Dr. McGee is here as well, who he was very involved with Operation Smile. I just saw these two pictures that show Russell doing micro without any light, so they had to use flashlights to do their micro because the lights went out in the micro machine. I think that's unbelievable. And because he, works in hard environments and he gets down on the floor to make a splint because there's nowhere else to make a splint. I think that's classic Russell. Just we can't make it work, you figure out a different way to do it. All right, so, oh, darn it, I missed there we go. Okay, so faculty, 1975, Paul Wayback, 1977, Alan Van Beek, 1980, Louis Kincaid, and Robert Russell. This little picture I had was that I just had to blow this part up because I guess there was a time when shirts, mesh shirts, net shirts were a thing. And Russell's got one on. Do you see that? In 1982, Elof Erickson, 1986, Reed Hansen, and 1987, Clyde Smoot. I put this picture in just to show that how I remember most of these early years is socially. Obviously, I was a kid growing up on the lake, and I met all of these people at my house when they would come for our summer parties. So yeah, it just when I see these pictures, it just brings back a whole lot of very fond memories of those years. So Dr. Zook was chair or president, I don't know exactly what you'd call it when you're at the Plastic Surgery Research Council, where he held the Research Council here in 1981. And I think it's a great picture that shows that he actually must have bought everybody shirts to wear, matching shirts, which I think is awesome. We may need to do that next time. And then Dr. Neumeister was also in charge of the Research Council back in 2008. So it's been in Springfield both 81 and 2008. So the first female residents were Dr. Roxanne Guy and Dr. Petra Schneider back in 1983, which is pretty early in the residency program. And obviously we all know that Dr. Zook's always been a huge advocate for females in plastic surgery. Let's see, I want to see if I can do this. I have another picture there if I can make it work. I think the problem is I don't know how to click on that. All right, well, we're going to move on. I had a picture there of Petra and Roxy more recently with Dr. Zook as explaining how Dr. Guy was the first female president for ASPS as well. So for the plastic surgery faculty, moving on, Dr. Kusan was next, and that is a year I don't have. Ironically, our human resources has no information on when he was hired and when he left, which is so weird, but they don't, so I definitely need help with that one. Dr. Brown came in 1988, Dr. Zamboni in 1991, and then Dr. Milner in 1997. And Dr. Kusan had been very influential in the burn, in our burn unit, and then Dr. Stephen Milner had taken that over when he came. So the hand fellowship, now this is one I have to make work, so I have to figure out in the back, can you help me make these pop-ups work? Because these have to work. So, wait, okay, stop. So the hand fellowship was started by Dr. Brown in 1995. The first fellow was Dr. Kim Crofts, you see in the picture. And then the second fellow the next year came because of Dr. Prebase, in this picture here in the corner, influenced him to look at SIU as a hand fellow. You can do it now. And that was Dr. Neumeister. So it just shows you the connection that we all have. Dr. Prebase had been a resident here, and then that was at Brigham and Women's, and Neumeister was under him there, and that was the influence that brought him to SIU. And I think it's very funny, I had to use this picture of Dr. Prebase because it shows how he doodles in the OR, and we all know that Dr. Neumeister likes to doodle, so I wonder where he got it from. So hand therapy started in 1989. And this just shows our hand therapists that we've had over the years, a very solid core group that's been around a long time. Once again, Dr. Zook realizing the importance of having hand therapy in the office so that it's easy for the patients and there can be communication between the surgeons and the hand therapists, have really elevated hand care in Springfield. Bayless building was where we all are today, what actually was not our office originally. Offices were torn down to build the Bayless. That's the crosswalk that you can see going over to the hospital from the clinics building. So those buildings were torn down, and the Bayless was built and being built in 1991. And then in 1993 was the ribbon cutting, and that's the office that we know today. In 1993 was the start of the integrated plastic surgery program. That we were the third program in the country to do this, and Dr. Zook was very instrumental in that happening because he was on the task force that created the integrated program. And our first integrated resident was Mindy Hawes on the end. I guess that would be on your right. And then can you click on it for me in the back? And just kind of show the change. Our first integrated resident has become the second female president of the ASAPS Society. So it's pretty cool. All right, so moving on with faculty, in 97, Dr. Neumeister joined the faculty after doing his fellowship. Brad Wilhelmy came in 2000 and has then since moved on and become chair at Louisville. I joined in 2003, Dr. Bueno in 2006. Carissa Cooney was not a plastic surgeon, but she was given a faculty position in research, and she is now at Johns Hopkins with her husband, who's one of our residents, Damon Cooney. And then Nada Berry was in 2011 and Francisca Hootner in 2014. So the 2008 was the Elvin G. Zook Endowed Chair, which all of you are probably very familiar with because I'm sure you were asked to donate at some point. It was actually the first endowed chair at SIU, which is really cool, really. I mean, the first endowed chair in all of SIU was in plastics. And it was because it was very important for my dad that he wanted to do this. He put a ton of effort into it. He gave a lot of his own money, but then also asked for donations. And it was always very important for him for it to be, the earnings of it to be spent on education and research only, never for a salary. So he always made that a stipulation with it. So it's grown and been a great resource for us for our education and for research. And obviously Dr. Neumeister is the endowed chair of plastic surgery. So further on for faculty, in 2015, Kevin Caldner and Brian Maley. Kevin has moved on to UNC, and he's a pediatric surgeon at UNC now, and Brian Maley is chair at SLU in plastic surgery. Abigail Cochran was in Decatur. She was our first surgeon that was in Decatur as a satellite. And then Dr. Ruphausen now has that position. And then our two newest faculty are Tim Doherty and Jimmy Winters. And they've been with us about 2 years now. So I morphed this from a couple slides that my dad had that he gave talks for when he had received an award. And some of these numbers may not be totally accurate, but I tried my best. We have, as far as I can tell, we have 20 presidents of national organizations. These are SIU residents who have graduated. 18 full-time faculty at some institution throughout the country. 6 chairmen in plastic surgery, 2 chairmen in surgery. 1 state senator I cannot figure out who this is. Does anybody know who this is? You can write it down if you do. Is it Alan Hurt by any chance? I don't know who it is, but we have 1 state senator, or had. I'm not saying he still is state senator, but he was at some point. We've had 29 women in the program, and we've had 6 plastic surgery program directors, which I'm not actually sure if that's accurate. I think it may be higher than that. So SIU faculty, what have they done? So it's been 50 years. We've had 23 faculty. We've had 6 plastic surgery division chairs that have come from faculty members, 2 department chairs, 1 burn director at Hopkins, and 9 retired or deceased out of those 23. And then I need to, hopefully the clicker will work. No, I need to click again. And obviously the most recent retiree is Dr. Russell, who we're here to celebrate today. And then I wanted to finish off with probably a not as well-known quote of Dr. Abraham Lincoln, but if any of you know my dad, you know that he was a huge Abraham Lincoln fan, and this was one of his favorite quotes, that I like to see a man proud of the place in which he lives. I like to see a man live in it so that his place is proud of him. And I think that, sums up SIU and how we feel about giving back to your community as a plastic surgeon, being part of that community, and having pride in what you do. All right, so let's celebrate 50 and Bubba. So was this another birthday party or something, this picture?
No, that was, I took that. We were just getting Bob was in Australia.
Oh, okay. He was at Melbourne, and so you were taking a faculty picture, but without him, so you held up a picture.
And that picture is a picture we took that is supposed to depict Magnum PI. He's got leaning into the camera.
Oh, okay. That's funny. It's funny because we do that every year. We have to do that same thing with our residents when we take a picture of them each year when we first start in July. And it's because we always have a resident who's up in Chicago doing a pediatric rotation. And so we always have to get their picture down from the wall and have it also in the picture with us. So that's pretty funny. I didn't realize that's what that was from. So that's all I have for my talk. So I think Dr. Neumeister is going to come back up.